for Sunday, October 4th, 2020. This is the Pro and Con Show, and my name is Michael James Ott, and as always, welcome to the show. So just a couple seconds here, encouraging people to be better citizens, to be more aware of what's going on. These issues that face us are, usually quite complex. Otherwise, they're very easily resolved, right? So the more complex they are, the longer it takes to resolve them. Causes frustration. Some people say, "Oh, I'm so frustrated because we haven't resolved this issue." How many years have we been talking about abortion or gun rights and so gun rights and so on? Fair, but how many years have we, the citizenry, really done our best effort at trying to resolve them? Well, I would answer 0. Okay, we have been elect and forget. That's the way I look at it. We elect and forget, and then we sit around in coffee shops and in bars, and we drink a cup of coffee, and we talk about these people in our government and how badly they're doing for us. Well, it's because we haven't been doing a good job as citizens. We haven't been demanding a higher standard of performance from these folks. And one of the main reason why we struggle so much is one is we elect and forget, but two, we are allowing ourselves to find candidates to fill this structure, okay? The executive, judiciary, and legislative branches of our government. We allow people who would be king to get into those positions. And the reason why we do that is because we're allowing two political parties, basically. And it sprung up, the political party system sprung up because the Constitution of the United States is completely silent on how you identify candidates for elected office. Completely silent. And I think if I remember reading correctly, it's because the Constitution as it exists, it was hard enough to get what we got with the structure and stuff like that over a course of many weeks and furious debates amongst the delegates there. And the whole idea of trying to stipulate or mandate somehow how the candidates might be identified, well, they just couldn't get any traction going. They just couldn't figure out how to do it. Well, and I'm not saying that I have, although we have some ideas myself, and there's some handfuls of other neighbors, community members, people like you and I, who have thought about this some, and we've come to this idea that rather than have the political parties and have these people through this election process ending up electing people who would be king, we should instead implement something that we're calling, or at least I'm calling for the folks that I've known, citizen statesmanship, which is, people like you, people like me. We would be a large net every handful of years when we needed to fill positions in our government. We would cast a random net, a large net, and start picking people randomly, just like similar to jury duty. And then we would start screening them, similar to jury duty. And then ultimately, we would, at some point, actually cast our votes for some of the best candidates and have them fill these positions. And I truly, me and you and many of us would be very reluctant servants. But I guarantee you, and many of my friends and neighbors and other people that I've spoken to have come to the same conclusion. You're much better off having some reluctant servants of the people in office than you are people who would be king. Okay? Now, today's show is called Smoke. And the reason why it's called Smoke is because I want to talk about the coronavirus a little bit and help people better imagine the situation. Okay, so and I think the whole idea of someone smoking a cigarette is a great analogy, actually, because with cigarette smoke, and I think almost everybody has experienced that. You've sat in a room or anywhere and there's been a smoker. There's been someone smoking a cigarette. Well, so what do you know? Just think about that now. Think about that situation. So you're sitting in a room, let's say in the corner of the room, there's a person smoking a cigarette. Well, what's true? Well, the smoke is very dense over where this person is smoking, right? And there's this kind of swirling cloud of smoke around this person. And even when they're doing the thing where they're not trying to blow smoke in your face, so they contort and they try to blow the smoke to the side, to the back, the cigarette and everything, it's causing a kind of a higher density right by that person. And then if you sit there and you watch the smoke, is floating across the room, but it's also as it expands in volume, it disperses, right? And so in fact, and actually very similar to COVID-19, we think, if you are 6-8 feet away from someone that's smoking, your exposure to the smoke is way, way, way less, right? Than if you were sitting right there next to them or like right in their face while they're talking. Okay, makes sense? And then, of course, if you're in a different room, you might only barely smell the smoke in a different room if you're in the same building, or you might not even smell it at all. And so if you take that same scenario, only you put it outside, what happens? Well, then the smoke is dispersed much more readily, and exactly like we think the COVID-19 thing is. And so you can sit closer to someone who's smoking and not receive anywhere near the amount of smoke that you would be if you were indoors. Does it all make sense? I hope it does, because I think it's a brilliant analogy. And so now if you are thinking about yourself and you go, okay, I am a person and I'm going out in public and I'm wandering around in stores and I'm wandering around in grocery shops or whatever, okay, office buildings, hospitals, okay, and the people walking around, the difference is they could be a smoker, but now I can't see the smoke. But if you envision that they were a smoker and they were walking down the hallway and they're puffing on a cigarette, just think about what that would mean. So that means that, for example, if they're walking down a hallway, they're actually leaving a trail of smoke behind them. So if you were to, if that's COVID-19 virus, instead, if you walk behind somebody and get in that path, especially immediately after someone passes, that's an opportunity, a high, you would think, and okay, should be a thing to avoid, because it's a high probability of exposure if that person is infectious with the coronavirus, right? And then you think about, well, if I was in a room and someone's smoking in the corner and I put on a mask, what's that going to do? Well, it's definitely going to filter a fair amount of the virus, of the smoke, out before you breathe it. Now, you may still get a small amount, but it's going to be far less, correct? And depending on the quality of the mask and how well it's sealed to your face, you may receive nothing, right? That's the whole idea behind these N95 masks, is that if they're put on there well enough, you effectively will get nothing, even if there's a fairly high level of concentration. And then you think about, well, what if the smoker were to take a drag on a cigarette and then put a mask on and try to blow that out? Well, what would happen? Well, the smoke would stay right there, right? It would, okay, yes, you'd get some leakage. Okay, yeah, some, but nothing compared to no mask at all, right? Doesn't that make sense? And so you just look at the coronavirus, and the reason why I wanted to do this story is so that people would start looking at this and the wearing of masks and the separation from other people and how you walk amongst them, keeping in mind that anyone that you're visiting or seeing, unfortunately, because of the COVID or the coronavirus, half the people walking around that are infected don't know it. They're not showing symptoms. Now, it doesn't mean that tomorrow they're not going to show symptoms, but today or maybe never, but at some point, they are pretty darn sure it's roughly half of the people walking around with this are basically producing clouds of smoke and don't know it. So when you're out at the local, grocery store, or you're going to a restaurant, or just think of everyone around you as this person, and think about what would happen if that person was, a smoker, and what kind of pattern of smoke would they be leaving behind based on their activities. And just like a smoker, by the way, if they start screaming and yelling, then the smoke, if they've just puffed on a cigarette and then they start screaming and yelling at you, what happens? Well, that smoke really comes shooting out in your direction, doesn't it? So the whole idea of thinking about other people as smokers, that the clouds of smoke and stuff would be a good emulation of the coronavirus. This is all a great way to kind of imagine how these things are impactful, and then understand. Yeah, that's why it makes sense that when you're outside, just like if you're outside with a smoker, that smoke dissipates a lot faster. And if there's a wind blowing, and especially if it's blowing away from you, right? And so even if you're outside and you're with friends or whatever, and there's a wind blowing, well, what's the best place to be? Would be upwind. So, for you anyway, so that, if hopefully none of you are infected, but if the other folks at the table are with you and they're infected, well, the wind is coming from behind you and blowing the virus away. Now, and also, again, just generically, why being outside is a good thing, because anybody that's been around smokers at all, indoors and outdoors, knows that it's a lot easier to tolerate the smoke and be around people who smoke in an outdoor environment, because it just disperses so fast that you're kind of you're almost automatically barely exposed. Okay, so I hope that all of that helps people understand and visualize why the wearing of masks is important, why having the separation between people is important, why ventilation makes a difference, why walking closely behind somebody is probably not a good thing, especially indoors, on and on and on. Okay, and it's all so that we can protect ourselves and each other from this unfortunate pandemic that's come upon us. So kind of own it. I guess what I'm suggesting is, I would encourage all of you to own it, to own the understanding, to own the fact that you can be impactful on not only on yourself, but the people around you, everywhere around you. And it's by understanding that limiting the exposure is important, and it can be done. And the way to visualize it in your head is just think of smokers and how interactions with them would change depending on how you are spaced and outdoors versus indoors and the wearing of masks and so on. All right, so for the Pro and Con Show, my name is Michael James Ott, and until the next show, bye for now.